How far would you go to make someone fall in love with you? Ruth's situation was desperate. She was struggling to find food. As a Moabite in Israel, most people looked down on her. But Boaz was different, treating her with respect. Could this wealthy farmer be the solution to her financial problems? Though she wanted to marry him, how could Ruth get Boaz to notice her? This is the story of how a foreign woman won the heart of a rich and powerful man. Ruth's story would begin with an unimaginable tragedy. She would find herself a husband. As they fell in love, Ruth would get to know his family. In particular, she grew close with her mother-in-law, Naomi. But her happy life wouldn't last long, as Ruth's husband died. Bonded by grief, Naomi and Ruth traveled to Israel together, seeking new beginnings. But even in Israel, they faced big problems. They had little food. To make matters worse, as a Moabite, Ruth was treated like an outsider, so the women had to come up with a plan. Ruth ventured to a local farm to gather grain. Thanks to good luck, she found herself in the field of Boaz, a wealthy local farmer. Rather than being angry at her for being a Moabite, he asked for her to come back to his fields. That way he could keep her safe. Better yet, he was a close relative of Ruth's dead husband. This meant that he had the right to marry Ruth and claim her former husband's land. But first, she had to convince him to accept her as a bride. Consulting with Naomi, the women came up with a bold plan to seduce Boaz. That night, Ruth put on perfume and her nicest clothes. Then she snuck back to the farm, hiding until she was sure that everyone else had left. Alone with Boaz, she watched him eat and drink, waiting until he fell asleep. Shocked, Boaz awoke during the night to find a beautiful woman lying at his feet. Ruth simply smiled and asked him if he would marry her. Eagerly, Boaz agreed. Ruth's plan had worked perfectly. The next day, Boaz would gather the town elders and officially marry Ruth. Thanks to her wealthy husband, Ruth and Naomi had everything they needed. Their lives got even better a few months later when Ruth gave birth to a child. But this is more than just a heartwarming love story. Can it give us insight into how God works in our lives? Unlike other stories in the Bible, God never speaks to Ruth. But that doesn't mean that God doesn't intervene in her life. If Ruth had gone to another grain field, she wouldn't have met Boaz. This is an important lesson for Christians. Even though you don't always notice God's presence, He is constantly shaping your life.